The scent of warm vanilla and sweet yeast always hugged Leo like a favorite blanket. At 32, with flour dusting his worn apron and a smudge of chocolate often on his cheek, he was Leo the baker to everyone in Willow Creek. His bakery, Leo's Loaves, was a small, happy place nestled between the sleepy hardware store and the bustling flower shop. It wasn't fancy. There were no shiny chrome ovens or sleek display cases. Instead, mismatched chairs invited folks to linger, and the old wooden counter bore the marks of countless happy customers. Today, however, the usual calm was replaced by a gentle flutter of excitement. The Willow Creek Annual Food Festival was just around the corner, and Leo was buzzing with quiet hope. He carefully pulled a tray of golden brown apple tarts from the oven, their sugary tops glistening. These weren't just any tarts. They were his grandmother's recipe, a secret mix of spices and love passed down through generations. He believed in them, truly. He believed in every cookie, every croissant, and every cake that came out of his humble kitchen. He hummed a cheerful tune as he arranged his pastries on a cooling rack. He pictured the festival grounds, filled with music and laughter, and imagined people tasting his creations. Maybe, just maybe, his simple treats would stand out among all the big, showy dishes. His little daughter, Lily, often told him his pastries were magic, and Leo felt a sprinkle of that magic in his heart as he prepared. He wasn't aiming for fame, just to share a little bit of the joy he baked into every bite. The morning of the festival dawned bright and clear, a perfect day for celebrating food. Leo carefully packed his precious apple tarts into a simple wicker basket, covering them with a clean linen cloth. Lily, his daughter, gave him a big hug and wished him luck, her eyes sparkling with pride. With a deep breath and a hopeful smile, Leo set off for the town square. As he got closer, the sounds of the festival grew louder. Cheerful music, excited chatter, and the sizzle of cooking food. But what struck Leo most was the sight of the tents. Huge, colorful marquees with fancy banners lined the square, each one grander than the last. Famous chefs, some he'd only seen on TV, stood proudly beside their elaborate displays. Chef Gaston, known for his towering chocolate sculptures, polished a gleaming silver tray. Madame Du Bois, famous for her delicate French pastries, adjusted a silk ribbon on her velvet-draped table. Leo clutched his wicker basket a little tighter. His own small, foldable table and plain sign felt very humble next to all this extravagance. He spotted his assigned spot, tucked away near the edge of the square, far from the main buzz. A tiny sigh escaped him. He felt a little like a small brown mouse at a grand royal ball. His heart, so full of hope just moments ago, now felt a tiny bit small and shy. He reminded himself of Lily's belief in his magic pastries, trying to stand a little taller as he walked towards his quiet corner. Leo carefully set up his little table, placing his golden apple tarts on a plain white plate. He tried to make them look as inviting as possible, but next to Chef Gaston's chocolate castle and Madame Du Bois's fancy towers of cream puffs, his simple display seemed to shrink even more. Soon, people started to notice him, but not in the way he had hoped. "Look at that! Leo's Loaves," sneered Chef Gaston, loud enough for others to hear. "Bringing simple apple tarts to a festival of fine dining? How quaint!" A few townsfolk chuckled, glancing at Leo's modest stall. Madame Du Bois, with a flick of her perfectly styled hair, added, "Perhaps he thinks this is a school bake sale." More laughter rippled through the crowd. Leo felt his cheeks grow warm, a knot forming in his stomach. He tried to ignore them, focusing on the sweet smell of his tarts. Then, a sleek black car pulled up and a woman stepped out. She was elegant, with sharp, clever eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. This was Clara Vance, the famous food critic, known for her tough reviews and high standards. She swept past Leo's stall without even a flicker of interest. Her gaze landed on Chef Gaston's chocolate castle, then on Madame Du Bois's delicate pastries, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. She didn't spare Leo or his simple apple tarts a single second glance. To her, he was just part of the background, not worth her attention. Leo felt a pang of disappointment, a little spark of his hope dimming under the weight of their judgment. The sting of the laughter and Clara Vance's dismissive glance lingered, making Leo want to pack up his tarts and go home. But then he thought of Lily's bright eyes, of her unwavering faith in his baking. He thought of his grandmother, whose hands had first taught him the magic of flour and sugar, and whose recipe now sat cooling on his simple plate. This wasn't just about fancy decorations or big names. It was about the heart he poured into every pastry. Taking a deep breath, Leo squared his shoulders. He wouldn't let their snickers or snobby look stop him. He had come here for a reason. He walked over to the competition entry booth, a small, unassuming table tucked behind the main stage. The person in charge, a kind-faced woman, smiled warmly at him. "Just these apple tarts, please," Leo said, his voice a little softer than usual. He carefully handed over 2 of his best pastries, still warm and fragrant. He filled out the entry form with his bakery's name, Leo's Loaves, and noted his grandmother's recipe as the inspiration. He didn't boast or make a fuss. He just quietly did what he came to do, holding on to the quiet belief that good food, made with love, would always speak for itself. As he walked back to his stall, a tiny flicker of hope rekindled within him, pushing away the shadows of doubt. A little while later, a hush fell over the festival as the judging for the baking competition began. Leo stood quietly by his stall, trying to keep his hands from fidgeting. He watched as the panel of judges, including the sharp-eyed Clara Vance, took their seats at a long, decorated table. The first dessert brought out was Chef Gaston's masterpiece, a chocolate sculpture shaped like a swan, with delicate spun sugar wings and a tiny edible pearl. The judges oohed and ahed as they tasted it, praising its beauty and complex flavors. Clara nodded, a small, approving smile on her face. Next came Madame Du Bois's creation, a rainbow-colored mousse cake with layers so thin they looked like silk. The judges marveled at its perfect presentation and light, airy texture. "Simply divine," one judge exclaimed. Each dessert that followed was more intricate than the last. There were tiny cakes shaped like flowers, tarts with glittering edible gold, and pastries filled with exotic fruits from faraway lands. The air was filled with compliments and appreciative murmurs. Clara, in particular, seemed quite pleased, making careful notes in her small book. She looked impressed by the cleverness and skill shown in each fancy dish. Leo watched them, his heart sinking a little with each praise. His simple apple tarts, made with love but without any of the fancy tricks, felt a million miles away from these grand creations. He wondered if his quiet hope had been foolish after all. Leo's turn finally came. A young assistant, looking a little confused, placed 2 small, round apple tarts before the judges. They sat on a plain white plate, without any fancy drizzles or edible flowers. Compared to the glittering wonders they had just seen, Leo's tarts looked almost shy. Chef Gaston and Madame Du Bois exchanged amused glances from their own stalls, clearly expecting nothing. Clara Vance, who had been so impressed by the earlier, elaborate desserts, barely gave the tarts a glance at first. She picked up her fork, a hint of boredom on her face. But as the plate drew closer, something shifted. A gentle, warm fragrance began to fill the air around the judge's table. It wasn't a strong, perfumed scent, but a comforting aroma of baked apples, cinnamon, and a hint of something nutty and sweet, like a cozy kitchen on a chilly day. The first judge took a small bite. His eyes widened slightly. Then another judge tried it, a surprised smile spreading across her face. Clara, still looking a bit doubtful, finally brought a piece to her mouth. Her expression changed in an instant. Her clever eyes, which had been so quick to judge, softened. The simple crust was perfectly flaky, giving way to a filling that was both tender and rich with the natural sweetness of apples, brightened by just the right amount of spice. It tasted not just good, but honest and full of warmth. A hush fell over the judges as they slowly savored each bite, their initial indifference turning into genuine surprise and delight. Clara Vance took another bite of Leo's apple tart, slowly, as if trying to unlock a forgotten memory. The rich, honest flavor of the baked apples and cinnamon wasn't just tasty. It was like a warm hug from the past. It tasted exactly like the apple pie her own grandmother used to bake on chilly autumn afternoons, a pie made with love, not just ingredients. Clara, usually so composed and critical, felt a wave of unexpected warmth spread through her. She closed her eyes for a moment, and suddenly she wasn't at a bustling food festival anymore. She was a little girl again, sitting at her grandmother's kitchen table, the air thick with the smell of cinnamon and laughter. Her grandmother's hands, dusted with flour, would gently place a warm slice of pie in front of her. It was a simple, perfect moment, full of comfort and love. Opening her eyes, Clara looked at the humble tart on her plate with new respect. It wasn't about the fancy decorations or the complicated techniques. It was about the pure, unpretentious goodness that spoke directly to the heart. This wasn't just food. It was a feeling, a memory, a story told in pastry. A small, genuine smile touched her lips, a smile rarely seen by the public. This baker, Leo, had managed to do what no other fancy chef had done that day. He had truly moved her. A hush fell over the festival crowd as the head judge, a stately man with a booming voice, stepped forward to announce the winner. Leo's heart beat a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He stood by his stall, feeling small again, preparing himself for disappointment. He watched Chef Gaston and Madame Du Bois puff out their chests, their smiles ready for victory. After much deliberation, the judge began, and tasting many truly wonderful creations, the judges have reached a decision. He paused for dramatic effect, and Leo held his breath. The winner of this year's Willow Creek annual baking competition, for a dessert that touched our hearts and souls with its undeniable authenticity and deliciousness, is Leo from Leo's Loaves. A wave of stunned silence washed over the crowd, followed by gasps of surprise. Chef Gaston's jaw dropped. Madame Du Bois's perfectly styled hair seemed to wilt. They looked at each other, then at Leo's simple stall, then back at the judge in disbelief. Leo himself blinked, sure he hadn't heard correctly. "Me?" he whispered to himself. Then a ripple of applause started, growing quickly into a roar. People began to cheer, first a few, then many, then the whole crowd. "Leo! Leo!" they chanted. They weren't just cheering for a winner. They were cheering for the underdog, for the baker who had poured his heart into something simple and real. Leo felt a blush spread across his face, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. It was from a thrilling mix of shock and pure, joyful pride. He couldn't believe it. His humble apple tarts had won. The cheers for Leo grew louder, a wave of sound washing away the snickers and dismissive glances from earlier. Chef Gaston and Madame Du Bois, who had mocked him, now looked down at their fancy displays, a flush of shame creeping onto their faces. Their earlier smugness had vanished, replaced by a quiet sense of regret. They saw the crowd's genuine happiness for Leo, and a tiny seed of admiration began to sprout in their own hearts. Soon, something amazing happened. People started to move towards Leo's little stall, not just to cheer, but to taste. A line quickly formed, stretching back from his humble table. Townsfolk who had chuckled at his simple dream now waited patiently, eager to try the award-winning apple tarts. Chef Gaston, after a moment of hesitation, walked over to Leo's stall. "Leo," he said, his voice softer than before, "my apologies. I judged too quickly." He offered a small, sincere smile. "May I try one?" Madame Du Bois also approached, her usual haughtiness replaced by a humble curiosity. "Indeed, Leo," she added, "my compliments. That aroma is truly captivating." Leo, still a bit overwhelmed but beaming with pride, happily handed them each a tart. He watched as they took a bite, their eyes widening in pleasant surprise. The simple, heartfelt taste was undeniable. The ridicule had completely turned into respect, and a genuine buzz of excitement for Leo's baking filled the air. As the line for his tarts grew longer, a familiar, elegant figure approached Leo's stall. It was Clara Vance, her sharp eyes now holding a different, softer light. She offered him a small, genuine smile, a far cry from her earlier dismissive glance. Leo felt a slight blush, but he met her gaze with a newfound confidence. "Mr. Leo," she began, her voice calm and clear above the festival buzz, "I owe you an apology. I judged your work too quickly." Leo nodded, appreciating her honesty. "Your apple tart," she continued, her voice softening, "it wasn't just delicious. It touched my heart. It reminded me of my grandmother's kitchen, of pure, simple happiness." She paused, looking truly moved. "There's an authenticity, a genuine love in your baking that is rare to find. It's more than just a recipe. It's a story." Leo felt a warmth spread through him, different from the pride of winning. It was the joy of being truly understood. He saw in Clara's eyes not just a critic, but a person who appreciated the very heart of his craft. He realized she wasn't just praising his pastries. She was seeing him, the baker dad who poured his love into every loaf and tart. Her words were like a sweet melody, confirming that his simple dream, his true passion, had truly shone through. She saw his kindness, his dedication, and the pure, unpretentious joy he found in making people happy through his baking. News of Leo's victory and Clara Vance's glowing review spread like wildfire through Willow Creek and beyond. The very next morning, Leo's Loaves was no longer a quiet little bakery. A line of eager customers stretched down the block, all wanting to taste the famous apple tarts that had won the festival and touched a food critic's heart. People came from neighboring towns, drawn by the story of the humble baker and his heartfelt pastries. They weren't just curious about the tarts. They wanted to experience the warmth and authenticity Clara had spoken of. Leo, with Lily often helping stand bags or hand out napkins, worked tirelessly but happily. He baked batch after batch of apple tarts, along with his other beloved breads and cookies, each one made with the same care and love as always. His small shop, once overlooked, now bustled with laughter and happy chatter. The mismatched chairs were always full, and the old wooden counter saw more hands reaching for delicious treats than ever before. Chef Gaston and Madame Du Bois, humbled by Leo's success, even stopped by to buy some pastries and offer genuine congratulations. Leo's Loaves had become a landmark, a place where people knew they would find not just delicious food, but a taste of kindness and a reminder that simple, honest creations could truly be the best. His dream, once so small and shy, had blossomed into something wonderful. Life at Leo's Loaves changed, but Leo himself remained the same kind, humble baker. The lines outside his door never quite disappeared, and the aroma of his baking became a beloved part of Willow Creek. He still woke up early, still kneaded dough with happy hands, and still placed each pastry in the oven with a silent wish for it to bring joy. Lily still came to the bakery after school, no longer just helping but proudly telling customers about her dad, the famous baker. The success brought new opportunities. People suggested he open bigger bakeries or create fancy new recipes, but Leo always smiled and shook his head gently. He knew what made his baking special. It wasn't about being grand or complicated. It was about the simple goodness, the honest ingredients, and the love he poured into every single thing. He kept his shop cozy, his recipes true to their roots, and his prices fair. And so, Leo continued to bake, day after day, not just for his customers, but for his family and for the simple pleasure of it. He showed everyone in Willow Creek, and the many visitors who now came, that the best things in life, like the best food, often come from the heart. His story became a sweet reminder that sometimes all it takes is a little bit of true passion and a lot of love to turn a humble dream into something truly extraordinary, proving that simple, honest food really can be the best.